Good evening. Welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion in the book of Zechariah. So if you got your books open, we're going to start in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 18. Now, last week, we got introduced to Zechariah. His situation is that he is one of the remnants that have returned from captivity to help build the temple, the city, and the walls. His time frame is between Ezra and Nehemiah. The people are getting beat up emotionally. And so we see in Zechariah he's given a different message than the other prophets. His message is coming straight from God, from Christ, that there is a new time coming. So when we read last week, in verse number 13, it says, "And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me with good words and comfortable words." And what those words were was that before they went into captivity, remember we're always been taught, I know the plans that I've had for you, okay, to prosper you, to make you better. And here, he gets a chance to tell us. So as we go through the book of Zechariah, he is going to tell us these wonderful things that he has had planned for us, and that he has waited through this captivity for everybody to get back and get started again so he can tell us. Okay? So in the first part of this chapter, we met Zechariah, and he saw a vision of a man on a red horse amongst some myrtle trees. And we're introduced to that man as Christ. And Christ and God and Zechariah are having this conversation. All right, so now we move into this next vision. Okay, so the next vision is in verse number 18. "Then lifted I up my eyes and saw, and behold, 4 horns. And I said unto the angel that talked with me, What be these? And he answered me, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem." The Lord has laid out this plan, and he is going to give Zechariah everything. He's not holding anything back. So, in this particular story, the vision of the 4 horns. The 4 horns represent the 4 empires, kingdoms that are to come. So in this particular situation, you have Babylon, you're going to have the Persians, and then you're going to have the Greeks, and then you're going to have the Romans. Now, each one of these horns will just scatter and disperse his people. And it only because that's what happens when you bring a new kingdom in. Okay? People are taken out. People are used. They're taken to other places. So he knows this, and what he's showing him is that particular scenario of these kingdoms coming, all right, they have to come. All right? So here's how we know this. Because, one, the Persians reestablish the area, right? When the Greeks come in, they bring a new language. And that language will allow everybody to talk to each other, okay? After that, the Romans are going to come. And when the Romans come and they establish all their outposts, they're going to build all these roads. And that's going to be perfect for when Christ comes. And then he has to send out his disciples. They're going to have a place to go. They're going to have a way of getting there. They're going to be able to speak the language. This is all part of God's master plan. And he's laying it out for Zechariah. Okay? Now, so from this point back, all the discussions about getting the Jews back to Jerusalem, getting the temples built, and getting all this stuff was all said by Isaiah and Jeremiah, and now even Ezekiel. All right, but here Zechariah is given the view to the next millennium, to the next church age. Now, we also have to understand that Zechariah is going to be given the information about what God's church is going to look like. Not necessarily the physical buildings and the walls. He's going to be given the roadmap for building the church. And so that once the church is established, okay, once everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, and all these nations come in line and do the things that they're doing, they're just going to flourish. They're going to grow out from that. And the ministry is just going to go from country to country to country, and it's come worldwide. And that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what happened. All right. So now, I'm going to continue on now. In verse number 20, it says, "And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters." All right. The number 4. If you see a number 4 in the Bible, I want you to understand that as a complete kit. Whenever you see 4, everything is in that 4 is going to be able to do whatever needs to be done. Okay? Just like with the 4 horns, those 4 nations, those 4 kingdoms are going to be able to scatter the people. It's going to be able to do the things that God wants them to do. And in this particular situation, he's saying, I'm going to show you 4 carpenters. Okay? So, he shows them these 4 carpenters in this vision. And now here we are in verse number 21, and he's going to explain what they are. Now, then said I, what come these to do? And he spake, saying, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head. But these, the 4 carpenters, are come to fray them, to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah to scatter it. So, just like he brought them the 4 horns to establish the things that he wants done, he always brings in something to help the people. So here he's bringing these 4 carpenters. Now, like I was saying, the number 4 is like if you went to the auto parts store and you got a kit to wash and wax your car. When you opened up that kit, it would have the soap and the rags and the wax and the brushes and the hose or whatever. Everything would be in there to do the job. And so here in this particular situation, throughout time, God has always provided a carpenter. He's always provided the means to the end that he has predicted for us. So in this particular situation, the first 4 carpenters are the 4 carpenters that were sent to build back the city. All right, so that would be Zerubbabel, Nehemiah, Ezra, and Jeshua. And they're named back in Jeremiah chapter 31 as they come to start their work. Now, we also have to take a look at the situation that's going to happen 400 years from now when Christ comes. All right? That last horn in Rome is going to destroy the city again in 70 AD. But before they destroy the city, 4 carpenters are going to go out from that city. So you're going to have Peter, James, John, and Paul. And they're going to take, and like I said, their job is to build up the church, okay, regardless of who's in charge. It's so important that we understand that we have to maintain our relationship with Christ personally, and then our churches have to maintain that responsibility of getting the word out to the rest of the nations, okay, regardless of who's in charge. We still have that commitment that we have to do, that he laid out in Matthew 28. All right, go out to the nations, okay? Now, so in verse number 21, God shows him that this is what we're doing, okay? You're going to see these 4 nations, but I'm going to send carpenters that are going to make these things right. And as we understand, Jesus was the son of a carpenter, so he's all part of this. He's all part of this. All right? Now, so as we talk about Zechariah, we have to understand that God's not talking to him about the physical buildings. He's talking about building his church. All right. So we go into this chapter 2, verse number 1. He has another vision. I lifted up my eyes again, and I looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. Now, a man with a measuring line in his hand is mentioned in just about every book back here in the Old Testament. Everything from Nehemiah, Ezra, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, there was a man that had a measuring rod. And he was either measuring the city, he was measuring the gates, he was measuring for the temple, he was measuring for the foundation. Okay? And so it doesn't, it's very appropriate at this time for him to come and meet with Zechariah. So Zechariah is standing on the hill. God is with him. Jesus is still down at the bottom. And the man with the measuring stick is coming up the road. Okay? Now, in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 40, verse number 3, and it says, and he brought me thither, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand, and a measuring reed, and he stood in the gate. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thy heart upon all that I shall show thee, for to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought hither, and declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. So in Ezekiel chapter 40, this guy comes with the measuring rod and says, I'm going to show you some things, and I need you to make sure that the rest of the church knows about it. Okay? So with that in mind, now we read his interpretation of the meeting with Zechariah and the man with the rod. Okay? So in verse number 2 it says, Then said I, Whither goest thou? And he said unto me, To measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof, and what is the length thereof. Exact same thing that just was spoken to and by Ezekiel. All right. Now, so Zechariah understands who this man is and what he's doing. All right. But now the Lord has a plan. And so the Lord steps in. Okay. So let's go to verse number 3. And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him. All right. So the angel that was talking to him sent a messenger to Zechariah and to the guy with the rod. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. All right. And now here's what happens in verse number 4. And he said unto him, Run, speak to this young man. So he told the angel, Go run before this guy gets too far, and speak to him and let Zechariah hear you. Okay. Now, he says, saying Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls. So you have this man with a rod that's going to go out and measure the depth and the height and the breadth of Jerusalem. And then the angel runs and tells him, he says, you're not going to be able to measure this, because we're going to be like towns without walls. So now we move to the disciples taking the word all around the world, and that the church will no longer be limited to the walls of Jerusalem. And he's telling them that right here. Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. And he says that there's going to be so many people that you're not going to be able to measure them, and you're not going to be able to count them. They're going to be all over the world. Now, verse number 5 is God's plan. This was Jesus' whole purpose. After he completed his requirement for the sacrificial lamb, his next duty was to create the church, to get it moving forward. And it happens right here in verse number 5. He says, "For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire." So here, God's telling him, okay, to tell the messenger to make sure that Zechariah and the guy that's measuring the city to understand that there's not going to be any walls, but there's going to be a wall of fire that I'm going to put into the hearts of my people. And he says here that, "For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire around about, and will be the glory in the midst of her." So he's creating this new church. And in this new church, there's not going to be boundaries. There's not going to be limitations. There's not going to be any walls. He is going to put his fire inside the hearts of his people so that they'll be able to go out and expand his kingdom. So Zechariah is getting this glimpse of what Christ is coming to do and the establishment of his church. Okay? And he's going to be telling this to people that they just want to come home. Right? And so what he's telling them is that it's not just going to be about our home anymore. This is going to be something that's going to be beyond your wildest dreams. We're not only going to be limited, we're not going to be limited to these walls anymore. We're going to be out, and we're going to be moving in all these other countries. We're going to be doing all these things because the Lord just told the guy with the measurement, don't measure these walls. You are not going to be able to measure how big my church is going to be. All right? So we have to read through this book of Zechariah. Every time we read something, we go, okay, where is he talking about? So he's going to be talking about now. He's going to be talking about when Christ comes. And he's going to be talking about the establishment and how this church is going to react to the things that are going to happen through these times. Now, there's 400 years from Zechariah to the coming of Christ. And during those times, we read that there was nothing said. It was quiet. There was no prophecies happening during those 400 years. Now, those are the same 400 years from Joseph to Moses. Okay? There wasn't any prophets in there. During that 400 years, they had to allow things to grow, allow the situations to happen. Okay? And like we talked about before, when the Jews came in to Egypt, because of that situation, they stayed there for 400 years, and they became a nation of 1 million, 2 million people, during that time. Okay, they grew. And in this time, during this 400 years, we're going to see all the nations come up. We're going to see establishment of languages. We're going to see establishment of cities. We're going to see establishment of roads. We're going to have all these things being played out during this time so that when Christ comes, just like when Moses came, they were ready to go, or they should have been ready to go. We're going to be ready to go when Christ comes and he starts his new church, because this is what things that will have to happen during this 400 years. So it was God's plan, and he's been holding on to it for all this time. All right? All this time, all through David, Moses, all through all this time, God's just kind of held on to this. Right? And now he's going to reveal this to this new guy in this new situation. Because like I said, when these guys come out of captivity, they're going to have a new heart. And you'll see it at the end, if you read the end in Nehemiah, when they build that wall, they bring those, the Levites come in, they bring the Bibles, and they all say, I just want you to read from the book. I just want to hear God's word. Okay? And that's the way we need to be. Okay? We need to want to hear God's word, and we want to be able to be on fire for him, and we need to continue his church ministry out into the world. Okay? All right. So this week we finished up chapter 1. We just got started in chapter 2, and we'll start off on verse number 6 next week. I appreciate you guys coming. Thank you so much.